I'm the chairman of the occasion, General Ike Wachuku, and I should disclose publicly today that he's my in-law, but he has not paid me dowry yet. And my fellow discussants, Professor Oyawoye from Ekiti and Dr. Ruben Abati, who wears multiple hats, including Arise TV and many other hats. He has no hair, but he doesn't want to cover his bald head like I do. You know, let me begin with some confessions, because people ask me, who chose this topic about mistakes Nigeria made? Of course, Itwa invited me to come for his birthday colloquium, and between us, he asked me, what should we make the theme, or what should I talk about? And I told him that I thought it was important that we discussed some important mistakes that Nigeria has made, but not with the intention of just discussing mistakes and going away, because that's not in my DNA. The whole purpose really is see whether is there a way forward. Is there a common thread to these mistakes? And can you therefore, with the audience interactively, begin to think about the way forward? If we thought we were on the right path, there would be no need for all this. The chairman mentioned the national conference of 2014. It went on to 2015. I was the federal government delegate at the national conference, and at the plenary session, they gave each of us a chance to speak for about, I don't know whether it was 10 minutes, about whatever we thought was important as our opening contribution. And at that time in 2014, I chose to speak about 9 important mistakes that I thought Nigeria made. So I'm not reinventing them, but I'll just quickly run through what in 2014 I told the national conference were 9 major mistakes that Nigeria made. Unlike the general, perhaps also reflecting my being junior to him, I deliberately focused on actions taken after independence, because in my little mind, mistakes made in 1914 or earlier were not really Nigeria's mistakes. You can almost ascribe them to perhaps the British made the mistakes, even if we were contributory. So, just running quickly through, and interesting, there's some common threads already with what we heard from the chairman. The 9 mistakes I identified then were: number 1, and sometimes I will mention historical events, but what I define as the mistake is not the event itself, but something that led to the event. So, the general mentioned 1966 coup, and January 66 coup, July 66 coup. Coups happened in many places, not necessarily mistakes in themselves. So what I'm focusing on, what was it that led to the coup? Because if you don't understand what led to something, then you can repeat it. So in my own opinion, the mistake that was made that led to even anybody thinking about a coup in January 1966 was that in the aftermath of the elections in the Western region, politicians failed to curb the excesses of their supporters. If they had curbed those excesses and people had toned down and there was peace, I doubt if there would have been a coup in January 1966. So if you're following my train of thought, the mistake was an inability or a refusal to curb the excesses of your supporters. We are still prone to making that mistake periodically. So that's number 1. Then number 2 was, again, talking about January 1966 coup, July 1966 coup. Both were very violent. Indeed, the aftermath of the July 66 coup was even more violent. What that July 66 coup sent as a signal to the nation was what I call the mistake, which is that the solution to violence is greater violence at all times. So that mindset of if there's violence, the solution must come out of greater violence was the mistake. Because if you live with that philosophy, it may haunt you repeatedly. The third one was that many people in various offices started believing, for whatever reason, that they must get the spoils of that office, which meant that people no longer started believing that they came to serve. Indeed, as soon as you got an office, there was pressure on what are you bringing out of that office for the rest of us. That is that's the third item. The fourth one I identified was, I said the elite, for whatever reason, decided to bring religion into politics. If you notice, I did not mention ethnic factors as a mistake. In almost all countries, ethnic factors initially become the bedrock of political activity, especially in diverse countries. So that by itself is not the mistake. But it's when some decided that they will bring religion into politics, it then made the mix a bit more volatile. And then the fifth one was that as a nation, we never embraced proper conflict resolution mechanisms. Perhaps if we had, there might have been no civil war, because it is the absence of or inability to adopt even, should I say, global best practice at resolving conflicts that allows problems to grow and get out of hand, all the way to sliding into a civil war. The sixth one, I will look at the general and with no apologies explain that. I think one of the mistakes that the military brought into governance was when they almost totally destroyed standards in the civil service from the mid-70s. Because from that point on, civil servants no longer felt that they had security in any sense and became very almost transactional in their dealings with the rest of the populace. People expected to be incentivized and expected to be settled. The next one I will mention is that it's a problem. The words of our leaders generally have no meaning and have not had meaning for some time. And that is, we were trying to run a society where, for many people, their word was not their bond. In fact, if you heard them pronouncing something, you knew not to believe it. If they promised you A, you expected anything but what they promised. That has been the recurring theme. Please, I'm not saying these things are unique to Nigeria. I'm just pointing out things that have reared their head here and are still stuck with us. So, the eighth one was, I would say, is that we enthroned injustice. You can almost argue that in a society, if you make it impossible for people to achieve justice, indirectly you've enthroned injustice. And once you've enthroned injustice, many other things begin to fall apart slowly, because including a resort to self-help and all kinds of manifestations. And we'll come back later to discuss the judiciary. But generally, I'm pointing out that a society where people feel that they will not get justice is vulnerable. And then the ninth one and the last was that I said then we embraced moral hazard in the worst possible way. What do I mean by that? By moral hazard, it was a term that bankers use a lot. By that I mean when you reward bad behavior. So if a society constantly rewards bad behavior, and please don't think about this in a narrow sense of only government. If all of us constantly reward bad behavior, somebody steals billions, he comes out of office, you give him an award, and the whole community hails him. You're rewarding bad behavior. So those were the 9 things I identified then. So I was telling each one when we were talking that I even wanted to know myself whether those 9 things have disappeared or whether additional items have come and joined them. Again, nobody is claiming that they are only mistakes. We're talking about mistakes that have the ability to almost destroy the fabrics of a society. Those are the ones that are deeply entrenched and are difficult to get rid of. So I've already explained why is it important to agree upon mistakes, either historical or present. Because it is nigh impossible to solve many problems that you have not correctly diagnosed. So the reason is so that you can solve problems, not because you just want to get involved in a blame game. Some, of course, prefer to blame everything on the laws of the nation, the Constitution. You know, my view on that, I will never argue with them about the Constitution. But a Constitution does for a country what governance and articles of association and so on do for a company. You are never going to clean up a company, clean up a country only by changing the Constitution, or a company only by changing the systems and governance. You need two broad actions. That change of constitution or system or organizational way you go about your business. And then you also need an arrangement that ensures that you throw out good people to occupy those offices. If you do only the one, you take a bunch of riffraffs and you change the constitution, they are still going to behave like riffraffs. There's no constitution that will tie their hands. So what we need is a combination of, like I said, to change any organization or company or system or country is to improve systems and improve human beings. If you don't have a system for producing quality human beings and quality leaders, they will pollute any arrangement. So that's why I say it's important that we discuss, accept, or even reject such things. Now, just to show people that one has not forgotten multiple other problems, I'll just run through some of them that even the general might not have mentioned. You know, people talk about the resource costs, oil theft. Yes, people are stealing the nation's resources, environmental degradation, you know, mineral exploitation with scant reward for host communities. Indeed, you pollute the communities. We're talking about instincts that drive elite decisions in Nigeria. It looks as if only two instincts drive elite decisions in Nigeria, and they are largely greed and fear. Again, I am not saying it's unique to Nigeria, but there's something wrong about the society where the two critical instincts that drive the behavior of the elite are greed and fear. Because in some other settings, you would have hoped that what will be driving people is a desire for the greater good, or to ensure that the system works. So we have a situation now where we appear to be losing the fight against insecurity. Kidnapping is now a very lucrative activity. You know, President Tinubu is not Yar'Adua. When Yar'Adua was elected, he was talking about electoral reform immediately from day one. We have not heard anything of that sort from the current president. Does that imply that we're happy with the way the last elections were conducted? Some of us would have hoped that Nigeria would progressively be carrying out electoral reform. If you don't demand it, you won't get it. Then there are all these issues about how we are trying to tackle insecurity, one level of policing at the federal level. And some of us right from the national conference kept explaining that. And please, some of us travel, we go to our home societies, and you wonder, how does a policeman from Adamawa get involved in resolving petty crimes in the riverine community? He does not speak the language. He arrived 4 weeks ago. He does not know anybody. The whole idea of policing in most parts of the world that is most effective is that the local policeman walking down the beat has local knowledge. He even knows the well-behaved citizens from the criminals. He knows those who are on the fringe and things like that. When you remove all of that and you just bring strangers in uniform into a community, what chance do they really have? Local policing in most other environments, the policeman even has his informants, people he has cultivated and all that. We lose all of that. Nobody is saying we don't understand the dangers of state police. People get worried. We're talking about 3 levels of policing: federal, state, and community. And I put it to you that without having some form of local policing, it will be impossible to solve local crimes. It's not the FBI that solves local crimes in Buffalo or in Wyoming. What chance do they have? You need local knowledge and local personnel, boots on the ground. So issues have come up. As a nation, our revenue as a percentage of even our budget is not good enough. Our revenue as a percentage of GDP is among the lowest, even in Africa that is poor. So what does that tell you? We are not good at generating revenue. People occupy political space or get political appointments to struggle for whatever little revenue is coming out. They're not really growing the pie, nor are they in any way taking the necessary actions to ensure that we come up with revenue to GDP figures that are more in line with what you expect from a country like Nigeria, which would be at least doubling or tripling our current revenue to GDP ratio. Of course, we know about poor infrastructure. I mentioned earlier judiciary and leakages. We could go on and on. But where does all that lead us? I think it's important to find a common thread. All these things you defined, is there a common thread? Because, like they say, when police go to a crime scene, they get all the evidence and they look and see whether there's a pattern to the fraud. If you can discover the pattern to the fraud, probably you're making some progress. The common thread that I see today in 2024 is that many actors, political actors, business actors, are actually competing at a game called state capture. If you forget about the particular offenses they commit, what is the common thread through all those things? What do I call state capture? As Nigeria, it's a Nigerian state, it's supposed to work for 200 million Nigerians. But if I'm concerned with making sure that it does not work for 200 million Nigerians, it only works for me and a handful of persons. I'm trying to capture the state and make myself the priority. So the point I'm making is that you can change the word state capture, you can call it corruption, but let me tell you why I'm careful not to just call it corruption. Because corruption presumes that you are doing something illegal, and it is usually has to be illegal. But state capture, the danger with state capture is that sometimes it is legal. I can organize the affairs of my state. Take Abia State recently. The governor revoked all the past arrangements on paying pensions to past governors because effectively he thought it was state capture. When you are in office, you decide that you will capture a slice, a huge slice of future revenues forever and ever. It's actually legal. So people are competing now because state capture has become the vogue. If I can find a way in my state to take a slice of the revenues forever, 5%, 10%, if I can go into a government ministry and take a slice of revenues under some arrangement, if I can create some PPP project, create a dispute with the government, go for arbitration, get a huge slice. The danger with state capture is that some of these things I've mentioned are actually legal. Legal in the sense that if I have an arrangement that says 1/10 of the revenue of River State, where I come from, accrues to me or my company forever, and the law was passed, it is legal. Is it ethical? Probably no. So I'm trying to point out to you that it's not about just corruption. That's too narrow a definition. The real game at hand is state capture. And what is happening is that political actors, business elite as well, I don't want to exclude businessmen, all believe now that they have a divine right to find their own way using agents in government and all to capture something for themselves. And to bring it even nearer home, there was a time when if a poor man educated their child well, that child may get a job in NMPC and may become the breadwinner. And even with an extended family system, the whole family could somehow benefit from the one well-educated child. What do we have today? I put it to you that the poor man's child does not get a look in into NMPC. What we have, and I use NMPC as one example, not to waste our time. What we have is that persons who got into NMPC on merit entered that place and changed the system together with political actors and made it impossible for merit to become the basis for gaining admission into the place. So the truth is that even the interview lists of those organizations, if you do not have a godfather, you don't even make it. So what are we really doing? Many of us in this room got educated. Our parents or ourselves, on account of our education, got a job, and we began to climb up. Today, the top 1%, 2% of Nigerians that already were in control have progressively removed the ladder and made it impossible for a poor man's child to ever join them. And the saddest thing about it is that this is not an easy problem to solve, because if the mindset of the leaders is that they're going to capture things for themselves largely and only give crumbs off the table to their followers, it's going to continue almost forever until such time as some people decide they want to do something about it. Now, interestingly, why I said it's complicated, there's something called the Stockholm Syndrome. There have been studies that have shown that often you get people no longer understand who is holding them down. They actually celebrate and applaud that person for as long as they're getting some crumbs off the table. With that sort of mindset, if it continues unchallenged, then this status quo can stay endlessly. So, what is it that we need to do for the majority of Nigeria's 200 million population? They are not direct beneficiaries of state capture. Indeed, they are the victims. Even look at the way we are distributing so-called palliatives and all that. How can you send 100,000, let's say, bags of rice or beans to Kano that has 10, 15 million hungry people, and you say you are doing something? In all honesty, even the method we have used to try and put in place safety nets are totally unserious and show that there is no intention to ensure that any assistance gets to the poorest of the poor. If anything, it's an arrangement by some narrow elite, again, to even capture what was voted for the poor. And to just give you an indication, because I will try and round up, because I really want to hear from the discussants and from the audience. You know, in 2019, I was the keynote speaker at the Economic Summit. It was 25 years old, the summit. It was Brother Aswe bullied me to come in to speak as the keynote speaker, and I went there. And I told them something that, you know, the fuel subsidy is unaffordable. But more importantly, I pointed out that unlike 2012, when the financial sector, the fintechs, were almost not well developed enough, that even in 2019, more so in 2024, we actually have the instrument through the new national ID card, which is actually a payment-enabled instrument. Every Nigerian has a name. So you could actually, if you were serious, issue this damn card to every Nigerian. All of them have their name. But for whatever reason, the government always stops short of giving them the card. If you give them that card, then you don't need to ask people to queue up for anything. You can program a payment and give particular segments you like, or you pick 5,000 today, 10,000 tomorrow. Asking people to come and queue up somewhere in a warehouse and they kill themselves, that's wickedness. It's callous. Because you have the instrument but you don't want to use it. You don't want to use it because it's too transparent. Let me tell you one more thing about that national ID card and the name. And think about it, you know, I challenge you, Ruben. Do you know that if they gave everybody a national ID card, you won't need a PVC? It has more data on it than the bloody PVC. Why do you want to insist on the PVC? Because it makes it possible for rogue INEC officials to decide who they can disenfranchise in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, you can do so simply by a knowledge of surname types. You can decide you want to disenfranchise a particular ethnic zone, and they cannot stop you. So the point I'm making is that, and people come to me and say, you know what, let's get ready for the next election. I said, look, nothing wrong. I will never say, let's just lie down and give up on our country. Let the same people stay there forever. But are we going to repeat the same process where people are going to issue PVCs? We'll be discovering some with surnames from largely one ethnic group buried somewhere and things like that. Why would you take part in a race that you know it is rigged without, you may still have to take part, without demanding that the rules be changed? So I'm saying that we cannot just do the one alone, which is just say, how do we take part? Why should you take part in a race with INEC that till today has not brought out polling level results in Rivers State and Lagos and a few other places that you can add up and arrive at their total? The initial excuse was that it was sub judice. The case is over, not so. And also, if you won an election and it was convincing as you claim, you should be the one insisting that give everybody the detailed results. What is there to hide? Forget about the fact that if you go to the IREV, I went there last night before I came here, the altered resources are still on display. There are still polling units where it says the result withheld, because they know that if you give us all the information, we can all add. We can also see the alterations and begin to do some modeling as to what the real result was. So again, I'm not saying that Nigeria has always had perfect elections. No such thing. But I'm trying to show the danger of taking part in a polluted process without demanding a reform of that system. And in any case, common sense indicates, because it's intuitive, if you honestly, have you seen somebody that came first in the class, you got a result, you have the best results in the class, so you start trying to alter the results. What are you altering them for? You're the one that will be insisting, leave them as they are. Let people see that I won. But when half the results you added up for yourself, you can see them altered left, right, and center. It raises a question. Now, the point I'm making is that, so what should we do? What must we do? Because that was the purpose of all this. I will mention 6 things that I think we must do. And I'll challenge you to tell me, no, this one is irrelevant, this one you must not do. Number 1, I will choose my words carefully. The kind of change I'm asking for will never happen unless we keep our youths interested and engaged in the political destiny of Nigeria. That's why some of us started efforts before the last election to mobilize the youths, get them interested, say, no, you cannot give up on Nigeria. Go and get your PVC. Queue up for 4 hours. Let them dribble you. It is your country, it's your right. Because until nobody's going to come from outer space to come and change Nigeria. Nobody's going to come from Australia. It's only the people who are here who will bring about the change. And those with the biggest stake in the system are the youth. So all of us here have to consciously encourage them, tell them not to give up, and to be interested in the affairs of their country. Because that is a prerequisite for any kind of positive change. The second one I would say is that, I've already mentioned it, it's no use preparing for elections and you don't demand electoral reform. All of us will live here demanding electoral reform. What are we asking for? Just an improvement and improved efficiency using modern tools. I've mentioned national ID card, issue the damn thing, let everybody be able to take part in an election and vote, and we can monitor. So you have to continue to fight for electoral reform. It won't come to you on a plate. Number 3, in the meantime, we must hold every public officer accountable. Think about it. People are involved in state capture. If you just leave them alone, no whistle blowing, no pressure on them, they will even capture more of the state. So the rest of us who are not part of that state capture must constantly get involved in whistle blowing, looking out for examples of state capture, shouting to the high heavens. And it's already happening. Think of all the documents from Abuja that have leaked recently on the internet. Each time a minister, there are ministers now that have been warning the staff in their ministries that if you are caught photocopying anything, you will be sacked. What are they afraid of? That whistleblowing that must continue. So that's number 3, because it's like holding their feet to the fire. If you don't hold their feet to the fire, there will be no change. Number 4, your democracy works best where you have an opposition. So if you really want to improve democracy, you have to work hard at improving the opposition. If you don't do that, what have you achieved? You leave the winners comfortable. They can do exactly as they please. So the only chance you have is to make sure that you are constantly in the mindset of improving and organizing the opposition. It's like they say, give your opponent something to think about. That might curb his excesses. So in effect, number 5, what have I said? I said the real enemy is those who are involved in state capture. If you notice, I'm not calling political parties. You can be in APC, PDP, or Labour Party, or even NMP, and you're involved in state capture. You're still my enemy. The appellation you carry or the group you join does not change the fact of the substance of what you are doing. Like somebody pointed out, when they distributed SUVs that were luxury SUVs last year, end of last year, to give you the context, I pointed out earlier that in 2012, when the economy was buoyant, they bought Toyota Camry. In 2023, when the economy had tanked, we then went for luxury SUVs. It's that same mindset of state capture. People believing that we are here to capture what we can, and the rest of you can't do anything about it. So the point I'm making is that if your enemy is state capture, then you must organize the opposition with people who genuinely are against state capture. Oh, it's no use putting together some grand opposition where some people are only coming there to use that to get their own turn at the same state capture. Then what's the point? You can as well leave those who are there to continue. So the qualification of who you are bringing out in the opposition is important. And then the 6th one, I said we must do 6 things, but really it's 5, because this 6th one is something that we must not do. And that is that you must not give up. See, because change is not going to happen. That state capture, which has become a national pastime, is not going to stop unless those of us or those of you who are not beneficiaries of that state capture decide that we must make it a priority to fight for the rights of 200 million Nigerians. So, therefore, what have I said? Our task is to seek and encourage the few leaders whose sense of patriotism goes beyond seeking their share of the spoils. Indeed, we must identify and celebrate the handful who continue to insist that their priority will remain seeking the greatest good for the greatest number of Nigerians, because they're a rare breed. And then finally, we must learn to put our trust in persons who still exhibit a genuine belief in social justice and encourage them to deploy both modern and traditional tools to expand their network and spread across the nation. So, like I said before, doing nothing is not an option. So what has Pastor Itwa done today? You can call this also his contribution. He could have done nothing, but doing nothing is not an option. And then I will finally close, Mr. Chairman, because we are now in a dangerous territory in Nigeria where if they get your schooling wrong or the year, you better correct it before somebody says that you were there when they called the wrong date and you accepted it. I did not enter King's College in 1965, please. I entered in 1966. You might think that is not significant, but in an environment where people don't even know what year they entered which school or when they came out of the place, it becomes significant. Those who entered in 1965 were Bayo Ogunlesi. He's alive. I entered the year after him, 1966. 2 days after I entered King's College was when there was the first military coup. So I remember what year I entered, and all my classmates can vouch for that. And then, then I will now close by just making something, because on a lighter note, Itwa, on the way in here, somebody insulted me by asking me, "Oh, I hear you are in King's College with Itwa." And he asked me, were you classmates? Now, you see, that's the problem. When you grow up, the age gap narrows. When I first knew Asui, I could knock him on the head like this. So you can tell that if I entered King's College in 1966, probably then he was running around a nursery school somewhere or a primary school. So please, let's get it very straight. I'm not here because I'm his classmate. I'm here because I respect him and because he's among those Nigerians who are encouraging those who are fighting state capture and shows me that he's patriotic, and I want to join people like him to help to bring about change. So thank you very much, Pastor Itoa. Thank you for the audience. And it's my sincere hope that something will start out of this kind of engagement. God bless you all.